Okay, so we'll move on to Chief Financial Officer's report.
The first item is a recap of the facility rentals for the first 9 months. It's on page 24. Through 9 months, we've had rentals of about $90,000, a little over $90,000. You can see from the chart that half of the rental income that we have comes from the field houses and the gyms. Our rental income is, the budget this year was $75,000. Last year, we were at $93,000, so we're probably going to exceed last year's. I think rental income has steadily increased over the past 3 or 4 years. As I'm sure you're aware, the facilities are being used constantly. Page 25 is
Tim, when you put usage there, that's a bit, there's actually a bigger number behind that, right? I mean, because you didn't generate $43,000 on 29 activities, right? Those were basically 29 different basketball, Little League, whatever it is, right? Those are the general categories that you lumped in there, right? Potential use.
Probably renters would be a better,
Yeah, okay.
because that basketball tournament could have lasted 6 days.
Right, okay.
Yes.
And the pools, the Bullets use it
Daily.
almost 200, probably 250 days a year, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Kevin, I haven't been in that field house lately. I mean, that's a lot of usage there. I mean, how's that holding up? The floor?
The floor is obviously very slippery because of the foot traffic and the rubber floor that was put in there. I know one of the concerns that we got is because there was so much use this year between all the community groups and Little League stand, we eventually are gonna have to restripe the track lanes and some of those things and some of the basketball courts because there's, from the balls, and the people with the ground balls and stuff, kind of marking up the floor and marking up, or pulling up the striping. So it's definitely being used. There is some wear and tear on
Are we going to reconsider the rates for next year?
it. We do that in July, and I think we kind of look to increase them similar to CPI or something like. I know we went up a little bit last year as well.
But the other thing is, now that we have some history, following up on John's question, you know, if the use of the field house is requiring more maintenance than we're bringing in revenue or something, we should consider whether we need to increase the revenue more than inflation. If, you know, if we have to repaint it every 2 or 3 years now, and that costs, you know, $20,000, are we recouping that in our cost?
It's a good point. We'll look into it.
Page 25 is just simply a pie chart that shows the representation of how much each of the facilities is utilized. As Gary brought up, we discussed at Finance, Elizabeth Hennessy was here. She met with Kevin and I with regard to refinancing the debt that we have. Working cash bonds, as you're aware, have been paid off. We still have 2 bond issues that are outstanding for the building. One was 2006, and the other was for 2007. Both of those bond issues have certain amounts of it that are callable. The 2007 bond issue, there's no advantage at this point to try and call those bonds, but the 2006 bonds there is, and you can see from the outstanding debt chart on page 28, the column on the right, the 2006 bonds, starting with the December 2016 payment, we have about $15,460,000 of bonds that can be refinanced or callable. We can call them now, but the closer we get to the call date, which is December of 2015, the more money we make on it, depending upon what interest rates do. And on page page 31, it shows that if we called those bonds now and refinanced that 15,406,000 in bonds, our overall savings would be a little over $1 million at this point in time. If, however, we wait until closer to December 2015, the next graph on page 32 shows that our savings would be $1.6 million. That's based on the fact that interest rates remain about where they are, okay? If interest rates start to increase over the next year and a half, and they increase by more than 0.65%,
More than how much percent?
0.65,
33 is the explanation, page 33.
then it becomes more advantageous to call those bonds at that point in time. Our thought was that based on the current economic environment and what the Federal Reserve Board has said, that interest rates are probably going to stay fairly stable over the next 12 to 18 months. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with William Blair. I'm going to come back to the board every 2 months and report on about where interest rates are, and we're just going to kind of keep a watch on it to make sure that we want to continue to wait before we call the bonds.
And the idea is we call and refinance them?
Pardon?
Yeah, so
We
Yes.
call them and reissue a new series,
We
right?
refinance, yeah, and every 45 or 60 days, Tim will keep track with William Blair on
Right.
this. Report out to the board if there seems to be some change or pattern or change.
Is it
to
basically
begin the bond process.
10-year, no, 10-year rates? Is that roughly the rates that we're looking at to monitor? Because, right, we're gonna refine 15 and they're ending 24, so roughly 10-year rates, right?
Yes. Right now, we're paying 5%, and I think that the chart that she shows, if we wait until 2015, the rate is 2.99. And that's the all-in TIC is the true interest cost. That's the interest on the bonds, plus it includes all of the fees for the attorneys and that type of thing.
So this is more or
So-
less just an FYI, we wanted to get this in front of the board. We'll continue to report out on this, but in the event something starts changing fast, we would want to then move an action plan into place.
So Tim, your recommendation initially, right now, assuming the interest rate stays the same, would be to try to go out there and refi these November 2015? The second option, the 215?
Yes.
As opposed to July 2014?
Correct.
Now, I noticed on her little presentation here, she's still saying take it to market on 4/2014. Is that a typo on that one? Or, because I see the same dates, market dates for both.
I think she was just showing examples of what it would be at.
Okay. I guess the question is, when does the board have to make a decision on refining these?
I think what she says in her report is that the board would have to decide, for example, in September 2015, to refinance them before the December 1st
Bond payment.
bond payment.
It's
is
about a
due.
60 to 90-day process to do it the right, to go out and do it with a bid, allow people to apply to do the bonds for us.
Well, and that's why we're monitoring it, so
Right.
if things
But
start to
in-
change, we're gonna.
But in our case, we really need to have a game plan by next April, May, when we're doing the budget, the following year's budget, right?
Yes. Mhm. Yeah. we'd have
Because
to-
we'd have a first-year impact on it, right?
Right. Because it would impact that payment in December.
Right, because it,
2015.
and is that, do we have to do anything with our tax rates, or is that automatically gonna reduce taxes for the district?
It automatically does it. Once we refinance, the county automatically changes the tax rate for the bond and interest.
Okay,
Which would be a reduction for the taxpayer.
all right.
And so we thought having him come back every couple months at this point, keep us up to date on where it's going, and if something drastic happens, the board will have to make a decision based on the recommendation at that point.
And again, for the public, the reason why to wait another year is because we cannot call these bonds any sooner, and so we would not only, we would have to basically put all that debt money in escrow and still not pay the debt any sooner, right? Pay off the big portion, because you can't do anything until 2015 to pay off sooner.
Right, and we get a greater savings the longer we wait, the closer we get to the actual call date.
So if we did it, I'd said if we did it next year, we would get all this money in and just collect interest, and current interest rates are nothing.
Minimum, yeah.
And that would be arbitrage against so we would take that interest, apply it against the outstanding debt, but we couldn't touch the outstanding debt yet. We could not pay off that outstanding debt.
No.
Not until it's called.
It benefits the taxpayer for us to wait, for the, to sit tight.
Based on what we know now.
Right.
So if the current rate is 5% and the estimated total cost, interest cost is 2.99 based on the current projections, why is it only 60, if we go up points, 65 basis points is where our concern is. Because there's a projected 200 basis point spread between what we're paying now and what we'd be able to pay if we called them and reissued them. And we're being told that they'd be the same as they are. So if we stay within 65 basis points, the savings would be the same, but why? I don't understand why.
Because I think, as Gary was saying, the earlier we call them, we have to take money and put it into an escrow. And I think it's,
If we went out and borrowed the money now,
Okay.
we would have double bonds.
Right.
And the money that we sold the bonds for today, we'd have to pay interest on, as well as the old bonds, until we can call them. I mean, that's one of the factors that's going in here. So,
I think it's negative arbitrage
yeah,
if you refund in advance for the call dates. I think that's on page 30.
Well, again, I understand the negative arbitrage and issuing twice. I don't understand how she determined 65 basis points was kind of the break-even point when we're talking about a 200 basis point drop.
Would have to ask her.
yeah.
we'll get the answer.
Tim, that's a good question. I'm having a little trouble following this. I've studied it before, but she needs to be more transparent in her presentations. I agree with that. Just show us the calculation, where that number comes from.
Did you understand? Did you understand this?
Yeah, I think it's what she's saying is that her calculation of the savings doesn't, she has a window of interest rates where her savings is roughly going to be this $1 million.
Okay.
Suddenly, if it goes up 0.6, there's a bigger spread on the interest you're earning on it which then she has to recalculate her
Okay.
savings calculation, which would probably kick it down. So that's the thing.
That makes
Typically when
sense.
you put these presentations together, you typically get a range.
Sure.
The sensitivity out there, and that's what she's saying out there. That's my read of it.
Okay, Tim.
In the monthly financial report, one of the things that I mentioned in there was the insurance renewal. And the language I used, I said our final health insurance renewal. Every year with EBC, we meet with them in February, and we get their preliminary renewal numbers. In April, they give us the final numbers for the year. So when I said their final insurance renewal, I meant the final renewal numbers for next year, as opposed to the final renewal numbers on the contract, which was one of the questions. But we did very well belonging to the plan, and with the changes that were negotiated in the contract with the RBEA. We have a decrease in the PPO plan for next year of 0.85% and a decrease in the HMO plans of 0.15%. Those aren't going to have any impact, obviously, on this year's budget, but they will impact next year's budget. The the numbers for the health insurance and the dental, or the health insurance will decrease some in next year's budget.
Tim, I'm sorry, could you clarify again the savings due to the contract negotiations? Because I know Tim asked a question, I wasn't sure if it was the same.
Right. I think without the changes, we would have had an increase in rates of about 5%. With the changes that were negotiated on the PPO plan, we saw a decrease of 5.74% based on those changes.
So it's a net savings of 10?
It was a net savings, it came out to a net savings of, net savings of 10. No, it's a savings of a little over 5%. Would have gone up 5%, instead we're going down 0.85%.
Okay, 0.85, okay.
Yeah. So the financial report for the month, the operating revenue was a little over $18 million. The $8.9 million that we received from the state on the construction grant is put in and considered revenue. So of that $18 million, construction grant was $8.9 million. The real estate taxes, March is obviously a big month on real estate taxes. You know, the revenue from that was $8.6 million, and then there were a number of other items that pretty much follow the same every month in terms of general state aid and reimbursements for special ed and that.
Tim, while we're talking about revenue, I have a question. Just remind me, the township treasurer charges us based on revenue or based on the expenditures we have?
Based on revenue.
Okay. So one check for 8.9, he's going to take he's going to take a percent off of that for basically a check you had to walk over there for him to deposit.
I'm going to talk to him about having that as an exception, obviously, that we shouldn't
Okay.
be charged based on that, no.
Okay.
I thought it was balanced, no, it's.
Since we're talking about the township treasurer, is anybody from your group or our group or your group pushing, now that LT's trying to get taken out of that, of the idea, okay, we can't get them to change the software, that's so ancient, it's almost unusable. But why do we need, I mean, why can't they consolidate all the township treasurers and have one group manage our funds if we have to do it?
There's been no conversation at the Superintendent Association. There's still a push to try to allow boards the flexibility to vote if they want to get out of it.
Isn't there a state law and isn't there a state senator specifically for
They're just.
the township of Lion, advocating and getting a special rule passed just for their,
Yes,
Yeah.
just for LT.
as opposed to looking broad picture and looking at
The Representative Durkin was working with LT to try to get them out, but Senator Landeck stopped that in the Senate. So now he was I think Representative Durkin was trying to work with LT on another route to try to get some legislation passed, but he hasn't been very successful. It gets stopped in the Senate.
Is Landeck part of our district? Does he get a portion of it?
Portion.
So should we have him here to discuss that?
We can.
We're not
Try.
we're not capable of doing everything they do on our own though, right?
I think we could be. We might have to hire another person
Or we
office worker,
can
but-
talk with other districts
Right, we can
within there and
collaborate our
see if
feeders,
collaborate, yeah.
But from my conversations is that the Senate that is around the areas of Lyons Township is very pro Township Treasurer's office. And it's a good
Despite what
office.
happened.
It's a good office and it's an opportunity to pool resources and save costs to school districts and municipalities.
Well, when they charge off of one, a single check that, doesn't have any cost to them, a fee, to me, that's not cost savings.
And when they have
I
a
don't
software
disagree.
program that can't even put the names of the.
Listen, we all know, we've heard
So-
the presentation, we know this is an anachronism, and it's a question of political will.
Right.
All right.
We're not opposed to consolidating services with our feeder schools and running our own treasurer's office or running that.
Thank you.
Tim, keep going.
The expenditures for the month, $1,606,000. We're at about 70% of budget on the expenditures, and our operating fund balance, because of the 8.9 million, is $22.5 million. There were some questions with regard to some of the IMRF expenditures. There are IMRF expenditures, this is on page 84, for in the Title I area. When we originally set the budget, we had been told that our allocation for Title I was about $80,000. We used that to pay for a certified teacher, so there were no expenditures for IMRF or Social Security. When we got the additional money, we're using that additional money to pay some academic support people who are non-certified. So that creates an expense in IMRF and Social Security. That's why
So when
those
we
expenses are in here.
were asked to increase the staffing and said it was the grant, is that grant covering the IMRF portion that we didn't budget for also?
Yes.
Okay.
You had some IRF about age group?
There was IMRF about age group gymnastics. That was on page 86. At the beginning, because of the growth of age group gymnastics, it keeps growing every year. And because the individuals who are paid by Riverside Brookfield, the person who runs it, the number of hours that they're putting in it continues to increase. And once they get over 600 hours, because they're our employee, we have to enroll them in IMRF. So this is the first year we've had that individual enrolled in IMRF. Okay, in past years, they haven't put in that number of hours. So that's why there's some expenses in age group that on the IMRF side that weren't budgeted for, because we didn't anticipate the number of hours that person would have at the end of the year.
Is that the same answer for the principal and business office of why the costs are higher than what we budgeted to?
Those, I mean, if you look at the principal's office and the superintendent's area, which is 2320, if you look at those, I think the money between them pretty much offsets. It's just a reallocation of people from one department to another.
Okay.
And the same is true with regard down below that with 2520 and 2510. There were some questions on that. But I think overall, between the four departments, it comes in under budget.
Activity accounts?
And, pardon?
Activity accounts, did you have a question?
There was a question on the activity account with regard to the negative balances, and it was whether or not that the board needs to be approving loans between these accounts that have deficit balances. And my recollection is we discussed this when we first started presenting the activity accounts to the board, and it was decided that we wouldn't move money, that we wouldn't come to the board to make loans back and forth between the funds.
Tim, I have a question, and it's not necessarily directed at you, but we've gone through almost a whole year now with the shared food services at one of our schools. Have we gotten feedback on it, how well it's going, and positives, negatives?
The feedback I've had is it's going very positive. I know that District 95 wants to renew that. We're in the process of trying to put together a renewal with them for next year. District 94, Comeric, is also interested in having us provide their lunches for next year. So we've put together an IGA and sent it off to them for them to look at. I think the percentage increase is increasing from 7% to 8% next year, so we get a little bit more income both on the percentage and the fact that we'd add District 94. So it's going really well. It hasn't had really any impact
And
on
the
our
foods,
food service.
the foods that they've gotten, they're happy with, the nutritional value and all that?
Yeah, they're happy with that.
Okay, thank you.
And they meet the nutritional value. I mean, I know District 95 is in the National School Lunch Program, so they have to meet certain nutritional guidelines.
95 was happy enough that 94 and 96 asked to come out and do a meeting with myself, the other soups members from Quest. '96 was a little tougher to do, but '94 is now on board, so like Tim said. So we'll be doing 2 out of our 3 feeder schools as well with their lunch program.
Let me ask you the other question on those, how do you, on those funds that are negative for some of those groups, how do you make sure that they're funded by the end of the year, then, Tim?
Those are, when I get the requests for checks out of these different accounts, I also see the balance that's in those accounts. Most of the ones that have negative balances, I think, are really sports accounts.
Right.
Where there's gonna be fundraisers. And I discuss it with Art, make sure that the fundraisers are gonna cover those expenses, that type of thing. Another one that's had a big negative balance for a while is the, is the class of 2015, which is covering the prom. And obviously, we have to have expenditures for the prom as we go through the course of the year for the DJ and the facility, that type of thing. And it isn't until this point in the year where we start bringing in all the revenue with the sales of the tickets.
And baseball's got a $8,300 negative, so that they're expecting to raise $8,300 before the
Right.
end of the school year.
Right, they do fundraisers. I know we have the big, that Ford fundraiser coming up where they bring the Riverside Ford comes here with the cars, and everybody who drives a car, we get money for it.
Anything else? Any questions for Tim?